I don't know if I ever did have the idea. I used to tell people it was an accident that I became a teacher. That's not really true either. But I think I was as surprised as my family and friends. And growing up, all my family had been business people. My father and his father, even my grandfather, over 100 years ago, were in the business, my brother. So when I became a teacher, it was a little bit different. But it was the furthest thing from my mind when I was younger. In fact, I don't think there was anything on my mind when I was younger.
The band is a nice man, but he's cool. You know, he uses waltzer. Yeah, the machine cries, bang bang. Yeah, he's the Le Pen the third. Nice man.
I'd gone to UK and was studying business just like my brother had done. And somewhere I'd sort of become disillusioned with the idea of wearing a tie and crunching numbers all day. My friend Bill and I'd met him at UK. We'd made a trip to California. And on the trip, one morning we found ourselves on the trail in the Sequoia National Forest, early in the morning at dawn, fog everywhere. It was beautiful. I climbed up on a fallen sequoia. It was a log that was laying there, but now a sequoia is huge, so I was way up in the air. Looking down in the fog at Bill, I announced to him that I was not going back to UK. Of course, this concerned my buddy. We were going to be living in an apartment together. He just simply said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I don't like what I'm studying, and I can go home and work in the business with my father." And then he said something that I never had considered before, ever. He said, "Well, what would you study? What do you want to do? What do you want to study?" And I said, "I like this. I like all these trees, and it's beautiful here. This is what I like." And he said, "Why don't you go back and study that?" And it never had occurred to me I could do that. So that was probably a pivoting point right there. I went back to UK and enrolled in the horticulture program. And I got my degree in horticulture, and Bill was staying longer to be certified to teach. And I thought, well, that'll be good insurance for me in case my horticulture business doesn't work out. So I stayed, and after I'd finished getting certified to teach, I'd been working in the park system out in the trees, so I continued to do that. And sooner or later, the parks and I sort of had a falling out, and I came back to my hometown with a shovel and a pickup truck and a few dollars, and started to landscape out of the back of my truck when I heard there was a teaching position open. So I thought, well, I could do that a few years till I got things started. And the longer I did it, the more I liked it. So it wasn't truly an accident, but it was a surprise. That was in the early 80s. And by the time I got my own greenhouse business started, I had my files built and learning to enjoy the students. And I did both for a few years, but I got a family going, and I thought, well, I can't be working 2 jobs all the time, so I closed the business and continued to teach. At the University of Kentucky, I had Dr. Byers, who was quite remarkable and has a great reputation as a teacher. So I modeled the way that I taught in the classroom completely after Dr. Byers, and it worked very, very well. And I can remember making some of the same moves he would make. He set the classroom up in a way where he could see everybody's face and they could see each other's faces, and I did the same thing. And he would walk along behind the students and ask a question, then maybe lay his hand on the shoulder of one that wasn't paying much attention and say, "What do you think?" in a gentle way, but soon people learned that they had to pay attention because they were going to be called on. Yeah, I think Dr. Byers would be the model. The inspiration were probably the good teachers I had myself in my high school, even back in elementary days. We were kids, we didn't we didn't know about World War II. It had happened. It had ended 10 years before we were born, and we drew a swastika on our test, turned it in. So I got in trouble, got pulled out in the hallway, and got paddled. Well, as a fifth grader, I was going to show her the next test. I drew it bigger. I went out in the hallway, got paddled bigger. So the third test, I drew it huge on my paper. This time, Miss Etheridge took me out in the hall, and she didn't even take the paddle. So I asked her in my little fifth grade voice why she wasn't going to paddle me. And she broke down in tears and just named the names of friends she'd had in high school that were killed by the Nazis. So that was all the World War II knowledge I needed to last me for years. It gave me a whole different turn. About her actions, I learned so much. Not to say that that was a method she chose, but we learn a lot from our teachers, and we're inspired by them and influenced by them. And it's awesome and scary when you are one. Starting out teaching's tough. I can remember in the 80s we were assigned the smoking area for the students to watch over them, make sure that they behaved while they smoked. We would stand out there and start complaining about the job and how things weren't right. And teachers love to complain about administration with just cause. And the more we fed each other our negative thoughts and doubts, the more we were ready to leap. But fortunately, we learned to start talking positively, and the next thing you know, we both just loved the job. But there were doubts then. Probably would have left, but the Park Service didn't offer the pay that the teaching did. I know in the early days that sometimes I didn't control my anger very well, and I built a reputation of being rough and tough and easily angered. I remember one time, I don't even know what provoked the outburst this time, but whatever I had in my hand, I just got angry and threw it down on my old wooden desk, big heavy desk. Turned out to be needle-nose pliers. And they dug a hole in the desk, but then they flipped out through the old classroom, which was a trailer. It went down the central aisle of the trailer, in between all the students, a pair of needle-nose pliers flipping end to end till they bounced off the back wall. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it had happened. I'd just thrown something down. Scary time. I'll never forget Mingo sitting in the front row. He had long black hair. Mingo didn't move too fast. That tall boy sitting there turned around, looked at me. He says, "You just about hit me with them pliers." And it sounds funny now, but at the time everybody's knees were shaking. There was one little gal in there I liked really well, and she split right after the bell rang, really quick. I didn't get to talk to her, so I followed to see where she went. I found her in the home ec room crying. Needless to say, she never took my class again. I think I'd scared a lot of students away like that. Now, a generation went by, and she had 3 children of her own, and each one of those children I had for 4 years. They were all officers and leaders, and she herself came back and was an assistant of mine for about 5 years. I always wondered what would have happened if she could have stayed in the program, if I could have controlled that temper. There's so many stories like that. I guess I should have written them down through the years. They'll slip away. I remember my first year teaching, this one old boy hadn't hardly said anything. And all of a sudden he raised his hand. I called on him. He says, "Hey, Mr. Evans, you know the deal?" I said, "What?" And he says, "You look like a bullfrog." I grabbed him by the shirt and dragged him out of the trailer and threw him up against the outside of the trailer. And I said, "What do you mean saying that?" And he says, "But you do look like a bullfrog, Mr. Evans." I said, "Well, that may be true, but don't say it out in class." He said, "Okay." That was the last trouble I had out of him. I'm glad I didn't punch him or anything. I regret being as rough as I was in the beginning, but you can't afford to wear any feelings on your sleeves either. So glad I stayed, got over that hump. So in the very beginning, when you're trying to learn how to do it and learn how to get along, and then maybe 10, 12 years into it, when just got talked into a bad mood. And of course, there's always times, right? We all have doubts when there's a challenge or a stress, or you're tired and you're still having to get going. But nothing serious. Being at one school and one job for over 3 decades, you can see almost the climate of society change. I can recall in the 80s when I first started teaching at Lynn Camp, the big thing in those days for ag programs across the state was to raise money by selling peanuts and beef jerky and things of that sort. And so to motivate the young people to sell, we gave away prizes. And the first place prize was a rifle. The next prizes were knives of various sizes. And boy, they would work hard to get that gun and to get those knives. We didn't think anything about it at all. You know, it was quite effective. I do recall one time that Donnie, fellow that had won the gun the year before, said, "Mr. Evans, people will sell more if they can see the gun ahead of time. I'll bring my gun and show it to them." I said, "That's a great idea. Bring it tomorrow." And there was one forward-thinking teacher there at school that saw the student coming up the hill with the gun. I remember hearing that she ran down the hall for the principal. "Here comes someone with a gun." So the principal asked us not to be carrying the guns around on campus because it upset some of the teachers. I'm trying to think of how we could give guns away as prizes, though. It even seems weird to me now. I think that I have a tendency to feel much older now that I'm retired. I'm not getting up driven by an alarm clock with a steady schedule. I'm not surrounded by the youth, although sometimes that can make you feel old, but there's so much funny stuff that happens all the time. I began my retirement with a point of humor to make a list. I thought it would be funny to tell people that I had so much to do that I had to write it down every day. But the things that end up on the list are not necessarily productive. Some are. You know, some might be to call a friend or take out the garbage or plan a trip to California. I like to travel. I really enjoy the outdoors. The cabin is wonderful. So sometimes even on the list I'll put on there, sit on the cabin porch for an hour. You know, it's the list is guiding me to do things that I enjoy doing for the most part. Some days I'll get up and not start the list, and those days are relaxing and enjoyable. But then when I look back at what I've done, there's nothing on the page. So the list is half plan, half journal. Yeah, I know the cliche, "You're as young as you feel." I don't know, I have to study that one, but of course the attitude has a lot to do with it. A person needs to always enjoy to learn, and to learn by doing and by studying. But the reason that they need to do that is so that they can earn to live, and they need to live to serve others. If a person is earning a living and living to serve, then more often than not, that's a happy life. I think that they need to surround themselves with a good, strong faith in things that are above them and more important. And to surround yourself with people that are positive, that are fun-loving and have goals is so important. During this process, you know, I mentioned my family and my friend Bill, and how I'd fallen in a slump for a little while with negativity but came back out of it. Those influences of positive living and goal setting are so important. But if a person doesn't live to serve, then I think they're missing out on some of the more joyful things in life. And if they don't earn to live, then it's hard to serve others. Maybe the next time I fill out a list card, I'll keep that in mind a little bit. It'll help me enjoy retirement more too. How's that for platitudes of thought?
Look back the third. Go, man. You got to feel it. Yeah, look back. Yeah, look back.